Hey, sweetie, are we going to church on Sunday?
Probably not.
Why not?
Last week the message was about mothers. We don't even have kids. This week is about stealing. It doesn't pertain to us.
Oh, you got that right. Hey, aren't you at work right now?
Yeah, so what?
Well, does your boss allow personal calls on company time?
Oh, it's okay. He's not watching. I work really hard when he's watching, but when he's gone, I do whatever I feel like. I just better finish another level of Candy Crush. Hey, aren't you at work?
No, I called in sick. They don't keep track of sick days. I think I used about 9 or 10 this year so far.
Oh, I wish I could do that. Stupid company keeps track of everything.
We got quite a stack of bills on this desk. Rent, utilities, which one should I pay?
Oh, don't pay any of them. The landlord hasn't even given us a 30-day notice yet, so we have at least 2 months of free rent before they kick us out. By that time, utilities will be turned off anyway. They just go find another place.
That's a great idea, honey. What about church? Should we give a tithe?
Are you kidding? The church has plenty of money. Besides, everyone's stupid enough to work for nothing. So they don't even need that much. Oh, I gotta go. The boss is coming, so I have to pretend I'm working hard.
Okay, before you go, so we're going to church on Sunday?
Like I said, the message is on stealing. It doesn't even pertain to us. I'm sure there's a lot of people that need to hear that message, but just not us.
It's great to have actors that are good on this. Wow. Thank you, Robert. Great job. Great job. Well, I guess you know what the message is going to be on this morning. Let's take a look. We're at the 8th commandment. We're going through the commandments. This is the 8th one. Thou shalt not steal. Okay? So just like most commandments, when you see it, your initial reaction is, well, don't take me. But I'm gonna share 6 different ways in which we as Christians are guilty of stealing. 6 ways that we are guilty, okay? The first one is obvious, it's just stealing, taking what doesn't belong to you as yours. And most of us, that's when we see this, that's what we think of. Well, don't go take stuff that's not mine. So we just naturally assume that that's the one that pertains to everybody. Well, let's take a look here. 1 Corinthians 6:8 says this. Instead, you yourselves cheat and do wrong, and you do this to your brothers. So stealing is bad enough. But here's what God is saying is, well, some of you are doing it to your fellow Christians, which makes it that much worse when you do it to those that you're going to spend eternity with, if you're really saved. So some people, youth included, are guilty of actually stealing from home. It says, you steal from your brother, some actually steal from their home. No, I'm going to be honest with you. I had a son. My wife would always say, did you take some money out of my... She stored it where everybody knew where she stored it. She thought nobody knew, but everybody knew where she put it. She said, did you take any money out of there? And I said, well, I'm missing $40. I said, are you sure you're missing $40? And then Aaron comes walking in with a Carl's Jr. combo. And it's kind of like, where'd you get the money for that? So we realize that people can do it. But when you steal from your own home, I'm sure that God looks at that a little bit differently. Some of us steal from our best friends. We had that case in a youth group where we had some young kids that were coming to the youth group and the one boy wasn't coming anymore. So I asked, what happened to so-and-so? Oh, well, we don't hang with him anymore. Why? He stole my money out of my house. He was hanging with him and stole the boy's money. And it was just kind of like, wow. Wow. And this boy had just recently given his life to the Lord. Some are guilty of stealing God. They steal India mix. When we first started, I'm going to be honest, when we first started, we had an offering with a key to it because we realized that some of our money was probably being taken here at Collision. So we had that's why we put it more where it's a little obvious, we can kind of keep our eye on it. So people just plain steal. And when you look at this, you think, well, that's what the commandment is about. It's about people that steal. And some other people in this church steal. But there's other ways of stealing, okay? What's the opposite of stealing? Is giving. So to counteract stealing, the other would be giving. If you're not generous, it's like stealing. Because we're expected as Christians to be generous. Let's look at Leviticus 19, 9 through 11. This is what they did back then. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the alien. I am the Lord your God. So what God is saying is back then where they farmed and had vineyards and all that, he's telling them when you harvest, don't go back over it a second time. Leave what's there. Some of you probably read the book of Ruth in the Old Testament. Ruth was one that, as a widow lady, that made her livelihood from going in the field and picking the grain that was left in the field. That's what she relied on for her livelihood. So what God is saying here to us is, be generous. Be generous. It's kind of like, don't use all of your money for yourself. Give some to those that are in need. And it doesn't mean offerings to the church. It doesn't just mean that. It can be helping out some of your children. When you buy groceries, you get an extra gallon of milk and an extra loaf of bread, and you bring it to your children's house because you know there's a need there. It's that kind of thing. That's the opposite of stealing. Let's look at Ezekiel 18:7. It says this: he does not oppress everyone, but returns what he took and pledged for a loan. He does not commit robbery, but gives his food to the hungry and provides clothing for the naked. He doesn't steal. Instead, he gives to those in need. That's what God looks for us. Stealing is bad, but it's just as bad not helping those that are in need. It's the opposite. 1 Timothy 6:18 tells us this: command him to do good and to be rich in good deeds and to be generous and willing to share. Command them. It'd be like me, Timothy was a leader of a church. It'd be like me commanding you, say, I want you to do this now. I want you to do that. That's what God's saying. God's saying, command them to do this. Don't just request, put it out there whether they want to do it or not. Command them. As Christians, this is what we need to do. Some of you know the story that Jesus himself gave of the end of the world when he separates the sheep from the goats. Those that are going to heaven from those that are not going to heaven. For those that are going to heaven, remember what he says? Blessed are you, I was hungry, I was thirsty, I was naked, I was sick, I was in prison, all those things, and you were there for me. And then the Christians said, well, when will we be there for you, Jesus? We didn't see you. He said, when you did it for the least of my brothers, fellow Christians, when you did it for the least of my fellow Christians, you were doing it for me, Jesus says. So when you choose not to do that, that's like stealing. That's like stealing because that's what God expects from us as Christians. It should just be automatic that we care about others. And everything's relevant. You can say, well, I don't have enough for my own family. But I'll guarantee you, I bet you there's a home I go into where I don't see food going down the garbage disposal. Where I don't see stale bread thrown in the trash. Where I don't see milk that turned being thrown out. We're all guilty of that. So it's not how much you give, it's just the fact that you are willing to give. That's the key to it all. Now there's a third one. That's the first two, just stealing and then not giving. Here's the third one. not paying back what you borrowed. Let's look at this now. Ezekiel 18:7, especially from a fellow Christian. He does not oppress anyone, but returns what he took and pledge for a loan. One of the ways you steal is when you borrow from a fellow Christian especially, and you never give it back. Now it's different if the person says you don't have to pay me back, that's different. But if you're expected to pay it back and you don't pay it back, that's it. I don't care how much the person has. You borrowed with the intent of paying it back. And if you don't pay it back, you stole. You stole. That's stealing. It would be no different. It'd be, in God's eyes, it'd be no different than if you broke into somebody's house and took $1,000 out of their house without them knowing about it. If you borrowed $1,000 and never paid it back, it's the same thing in God's eyes. So borrowing without giving back, it could be a money loan, it could be borrowing tools, it could be child support that a court ordered you to pay, and you choose not to pay. How many single moms in here? Raise your hand if you're a single mom. If you're relying on child support and you don't get it, oh, that hurts, doesn't it? It's just kind of like, how do you make ends meet now? So if you're a father and you have a child and you choose not to pay child support, you are stealing. You're stealing from your own child. Oh. Oh. Now, I can't speak for this church, but I know all kinds of guys that almost boast about how they figured out how not to give that cheating woman my money. It's kind of, no, it's your kid. It's your kid. I don't care how bad a relationship you have with your ex, it's still your child. It's still your child. So it could be any of those. It could be this. Rent. Let me just say here. You can't afford to stay where you're at, but you're going to milk it as long as you can. I'll wait till I get a 3-day notice, then I'll wait till I get a 30-day notice, and then I'll wait until the sheriff comes and puts a lock on my door, and then I'll leave. That's it. I was a landlord. How many of you are landlords and you own property? Have you ever gone through that? Almost every, I don't know, I must have rented bad people because it seemed like every single one of mine were that way. It was just kind of like, holy smokes, they knew the law better than I did. And they knew, and then if they filed bankruptcy in the middle of it all, oh my God, now it took like 6 months to get them out. So I am making my payments for 6 months, and I'm not getting anything for 6 months. And then when I do go in there, the place is just demolished. Demolished. They stole from me. They stole from me. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. That's stealing. That's stealing. So when you start looking at some of this now, it's kind of like, oh, shall not steal. Now all of a sudden, some of us are kind of like, I'm not done yet. There's 3 more to go. There's the 4th one. Taking advantage of another person, especially a Christian. Let's look at Exodus 22:25. Tells us this: if a man grazes his livestock in a field or vineyard and lets them stray and they graze in another man's field, he must take restitution from the best of his own field or vineyard. I don't think that was the verse. I've got here, and although this pertains, here's what it's talking about. It's when you loan money to a fellow Christian, don't charge him interest. Don't charge him interest. If they have to borrow from you, it means that there's a genuine need there. There's a genuine need there. If you have the money to give them, or whatever it is they're asking for, then it means that you have extra. Don't charge them interest as a fellow Christian, is what he's saying. Leviticus 25:14 tells us this: if you sell land to one of your countrymen or buy any from him, do not take advantage of each other. I think we got a few verses, but that's all right. It's like, don't overcharge, don't underpay. Now look at 1 Corinthians 6:7. This is one that unfortunately I see all the time. Okay? The very fact that you have lawsuits among you means that you have been completely defeated already. Why not rather be wrong? Why not rather be cheated? Let me just share what this is about, okay? I'm going to read something here where God talks us about taking a fellow Christian to court. Listen to this now. If any of you has a dispute with another, dare he take it before the ungodly for judgment instead of before the saints? In other words, if you have a dispute with someone and you go to court, you're going to court more than likely in front of an unbelieving judge. And that unbelieving judge is going to make a decision. It says, do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if you are to judge the world, are you not competent enough to judge trivial cases? Do you not know that we will judge angels? How much more the things of this life? Therefore, if you have disputes about such matters, appoint as judges even men of little account. Pick Dave even. I say this to shame you. It is possible there's nobody among you wise enough to judge a dispute among believers? Question mark. Is there nobody in your church that can settle this dispute? You have to go to court in front of an unbelieving judge. You should be able to take care of these matters among you. But instead, one brother goes to law against another, and this in front of unbelievers. Wow. Heavy duty. Heavy duty. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Look at this, 1 Thessalonians 4:6. And that in this matter no one should wrong his brother or take advantage of him. The Lord will punish men for such sins, as we have already told you and warned you. The Lord, now we know that God will punish some of us with eternal fire in hell for those that are not believers, but he will also judge those of us and punish those of us that are believers, because he punishes those, he disciplines those that he loves. So if you are guilty of some of these things here we're talking about, God has a way. It's the old saying, what goes around, comes around. Now let's look at a fifth one. Boy, here's one. I'm almost hesitant to share this one, but I have to. Not working a full day for a full day's pay. Okay? Let's look at this one. Ephesians 6:5-8. Slaves, workers, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear, with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. I did a whole message on this. You know this one. Obey them not only to win their favor when their eye is on you, but like workers of Christ, doing the will of God from your heart. You don't just work when they're watching you. You are willing to work even when they're not watching you. Because as Christians, we work for what we get paid. If you work for full 8 hours, you expect it to work for 8 hours. Let's look at Philippians 2:14-15. Do everything without complaining or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure. Children of God without fault in a crooked and depraved generation, which you shine like stars in the universe. You work without complaining, and you stand out among all the other workers. And you're like a star in the universe. As all the other workers go like, wow, what's so different about him? What's so different about her? And they find out you're a Christian. It's like, oh, that's why. That's why. Now, we had workers in our company. Christians. Most of our workers were Christians. And he was a really good guy. Really good guy. Hope they don't watch my videos. But he would listen to the Dodger game all day long when the Dodgers were on. And he has his job where he has to be on the phone constantly. So we had to take him listening to the Dodger game, and he thought we were being totally unreasonable. Like, couldn't believe we were not going to allow him to listen to the Dodger. If he was listening to the Angels, that would have been different. We don't have to Just kidding. Then we had to set up our computers where they couldn't go online to play video games and Candy Crush and all those other things that we knew that some of them were doing. They were allowed to read newspapers and magazine articles during lunch hour, but we didn't allow them to take it with them to go into the room because they're doing crossword puzzles and whatever those things called, and all the other things during hours. Some of us are guilty of that. We're on Facebook. Now, if your boss tells you, hey, if you don't have anything to do with your life, that's one thing. That's one thing. But if you're doing it when their eye's not on you because you have that kind of freedom because they're not watching you and you're doing it, is that right? Is that right? To be on Instagram or Facebook or any of the other things that you, or playing computer games. That's a form of stealing. They're not watching. Let's look at 1 Thessalonians 4, 11 through 12. Make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, to mind your own business, and to work with your hands just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent on anyone. We do this because we're to represent Jesus. Jesus is not down here anymore. We represent Jesus. And you represent Jesus in your workplace. They should know that you're a Christian. I mean, it would be sad if you've been working there and they don't even know you're a Christian. That would be sad in itself. But if they do know you're a Christian, then we need to shine. And one of the ways we shine is by putting in a day's work for a day's wages. Otherwise, we're stealing from them. Otherwise, we're stealing from them. I know this, that's why I was hesitant to do this one, because I see a lot of you on Facebook when you're on work. Now again, I don't know, I can't judge, because maybe your boss is telling you to do it, because there's not that much to do. And there's been times in our work where it was slow, and my son, who was a CEO, would allow them to say, hey, it's really slow for this next week, and allow them to do that. But then when it was busy the next week, they were expected then to work for a day's wages. Now here's the last one. Here's the last one. The sixth way we steal. Malachi 3:8. Will a man rob God? Now let's stop there. Remember, we're talking about stealing. Stealing is taking something that's not yours. What is robbing? Robbing is forcefully taking something that's not yours. Much more serious than stealing. Now, I've been to police force. If you steal something, that's a misdemeanor. When you rob somebody, that's a felony. You're going to prison, even if it's your first offense. If you rob and it's your first offense, you're going to spend time in prison. Plain and simple. I don't care if your record has been clean all the way through. You rob somebody, you're going to prison for a time. So robbing is much more serious than stealing. And it says here, will a man rob God? Yet you rob me, God says. But you ask, well, how do we rob you? In your tithes and offerings. Wow. Wow. Leave it there, hang on. Some of us are robbing God. Now, let me just share this with you, okay? You know that, now we've talked about this so many different times, you know that we all work for free here. I put a lot of hours in a week's time. A lot of hours in a week's time. And I do it joyfully because I love what I'm doing. I totally enjoy what I'm doing. But you know that none of us get paid, so we use the money that and we try to use it really wisely to help out people within our church. And then to help people outside of our church so we can be a light, the shining star, like God asked us to be. Yet, Many of you choose not to support that. You're not supporting Collision. You are supporting who? God. You hear David and I say this all the time. This is not our church. This church belongs to Jesus. Jesus. It's his church. He's the one that makes the ultimate decisions on stuff. And Dave shared when he gave up a few weeks ago. He thought it was hard for me because I've been in business where I've had multiple employees, where I was the owner of a company where I was expected to make decisions and had to make decisions and had to make major decisions and had to make them fast. And then I come into Collision and say, well, we're not going to do that no more. Because I got somebody that can make decisions way better than I can. And that's Jesus. So we allow Jesus to make the decisions. So when something happens in our church that's tumultuous, and I hope I'm saying the right word, and it can cause a lot of issues, we don't take sides. We don't take sides. Because Jesus runs the church. Jesus will deal with that. It's his church. We'd be naive to think that Jesus is not going to take care of it. That'd be like saying there is no Jesus. We go to church, but there's no Jesus. We pray, but there's no Jesus. We're going to heaven, but there's no Jesus. It'd be that silly. But Jesus makes those decisions. And yet last week we had, I don't know, like 120 people in church, and there was a total of 9 offerings. Last week. Total of 9 offerings. We got about 1/3 of what we needed to make ends meet. We're loving God. You are guilty of the 8th commandment. You are guilty of breaking the 8th commandment. Thou shalt not steal. You are a robber. You are forcefully stealing. So God says, well, the man robbed God, yet you rob me. Now here's the counter to the whole thing. That's to put a guilt trip on you, okay? Now here's the counter to the whole thing. God doesn't quit there. Verse 9 and 10, he tells us this now. You are under a curse, the whole nation of you, because you're robbing me. Stop there. You're under a curse. It's kind of like, if you're not growing, if lives aren't being changed, it's because you're robbing me. But there's an answer to this. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, and there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty. Now, stay back there again. No. And there's another part of the Bible that says, do not test the Lord. Don't you ever test the Lord. You'll get zapped. You will get zapped. You start testing the Lord, it's kind of like, no, you don't fool with that. But here God is giving you permission now to test him. He's giving you permission. He's saying this, test me. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you will not have enough room for it. Oh my gosh. It's one thing to give to where Collision has so much money we can help all people in our church, and we look for people outside the church to bless. That would be great. But the greater part of it all is you will be blessed. That's a promise of God. Test me in this and see if you are willing to give, like I know this young man is, and he's a brand new Christian to the church. Brand new Christian. In giving, you cannot outgive God, Arturo. You could give your car to him. Nice car you got, don't you? What is it again? Infinity. Well, a fancy one. It belongs to the devil. When he drove in, I said, you're in the wrong church. You must be. We all drive Hondas and Toyotas and Volkswagens. Or no cars at all, right, Rachel? But you cannot give him. You can't. You could. I have to believe this. I have to believe you could give your car away. What's better than an Infinity? A Mercedes? A BMW? I don't know. I don't know if he's in material things. But you would get something somewhere or another more than that. You shared what Carlos, what you and Sola, what's happened as a result of you making a decision to give every single week. And when you forgot one week, you made sure you came to give it to me. You can't outgive God. You cannot outgive God. It's impossible, but you can rob from God. You can't outgive Him, but you can rob from Him. And many of us are. Many of us are. Now, I'm going to say this to you. Now, listen to me. Listen to me. Religion does not need the money. We have a surplus. We have a surplus. And thank God to some really generous people in this church, I don't want to name names, that are really generous, that have given so much that we actually are meeting this Tuesday to find out maybe the offerings are down because we're not giving away the money. And God is saying, well, why should I give you more money? You're not even helping the people with what you do. No, it's not like we got a big service, don't get me wrong. So if you sit out there and say, oh, I'm talking to Jim afterwards. I'm the one that drives that old Volkswagen out there. That's not what I'm talking about, okay? What I'm talking about is, I'm not saying this because I'm counting the money and saying, oh, God, we can't make it now. That's not the problem. I'm not giving this message because of that. That's not a problem. I'm giving this message because you're not being blessed. You're not being blessed. And God wants to bless you. Test me, He says. He wants to bless you. How can He bless you when you're robbing from Him? It'd be like me saying to Albert, I want to bless you. But every week he comes to my house and takes money out of my drawers. My drawers? He knows where I hide my money. My dirty drawers. Let me see your finger. No, never mind. Listen, it would be just like that, okay? I'm being silly now, but it would be the same thing. It'd be like him coming to my house every week, stealing from me, and then wondering why I'm not helping him. Why I'm not blessing him. That's what this is. When you don't give, God says, you're robbing from me. I'm not going to bless you. But test me and see that if you don't start giving, I will not give you. I will, what does it say? I will open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you will not have enough room for it. Oh my gosh. Now this is more than just money. Blessings is more than just money. Blessings, money can be a curse sometimes. Blessings comes in a whole lot of other ways. Peace of mind, joy, contentment, all those things that I have experienced. Took me a long time to learn this. Took me a long time to learn this. But when I did finally figure it out, it's kind of like, now I know what God means. When people say, how's your week? You're probably getting sick of hearing it. It can't get any better. My life cannot get any better than what it is. Seriously, it can't get any better. But Jim, you're stupid enough to work for nothing. It can't get any better than this. But Jim, you give all your, it can't get any better than this. My life is just totally happy. Totally happy. You know, TGIF, to me it's like TGIM, TGIT, TGIW, TGIT again, TGIF, then an S, then another S. Sunday is great, but that's just another day. Because life is just great. Because God just keeps blessing and blessing and blessing. Can you say that? Can you say that? It's possible you're guilty of some of these. It's possible that, let's get the worship team up here. Possible that you're guilty of stealing. Possible that you're guilty of the opposite of stealing, not giving, not helping anybody out, not paying back what you borrowed, taking advantage of another person, not cheating at work, and then cheating God. Hope God spoke to you. Hope God spoke to you. Okay? I hope He spoke to you. It's not my message. It's not my message. How many verses did I use here this morning? I don't know. 12, 15. I want God to speak to you, okay?